The chemistry classroom was quiet, except for the scratching of pencils and the occasional clink of glassware. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, glinting off beakers half filled with pale blue liquid. Diego Ramirez sat hunched over his notebook, copying down formulas from the board. Then the intercom crackled to life. A burst of static filled the air, making everyone glance up. Diego Ramirez, report to the principal's office immediately. The voice of Mr. Johnson, the principal, echoed through the room. Diego froze. His pen slipped from his hand and rolled across the desk. A wave of whispers rose behind him, hushed and curious. The chemistry teacher, Mrs. Clark, turned her head towards him. Her eyes softened, but her words were firm. "You'd better go, Diego." The boy pushed back his chair, his legs suddenly heavy. He felt every pair of eyes on him as he walked to the door. The air in the classroom seemed thicker, as though he were wading through it. In the hallway, the echo of his footsteps followed him. Lockers lined both sides, their metal doors reflecting slivers of light. A group of students down the corridor fell silent as he passed, watching him with that same unspoken curiosity. He tried to breathe steadily, but the question pressed against his mind. Why me? By the time he reached the tall oak door of the principal's office, his palms were damp. He paused, staring at the brass handle that gleamed under the fluorescent light. From inside, faint voices could be heard, low and serious. Diego swallowed hard, lifted his hand, and knocked twice. "Come in," Mr. Johnson's voice called from within. Diego opened the door slowly. The office smelled faintly of polished wood and old books. Behind the desk sat Mr. Johnson, his sharp eyes fixed on Diego. Beside him stood Mrs. Turner, the school counselor, holding a thick brown envelope. On the envelope, in bold letters, was his name, Diego Ramirez. The room seemed to grow colder as Mr. Johnson leaned forward. "Take a seat, Diego. There are some things we need to discuss." Diego stepped inside, his heart pounding like a drum. And then the door shut quietly behind him. Diego lowered himself into the chair opposite the principal's desk. His eyes could not leave the brown envelope resting on the table. Mrs. Turner's fingers lingered upon it, as though it were far heavier than its weight suggested. Mr. Johnson folded his hands and leaned forward. "Diego, what I am about to tell you is not easy, but it is necessary." The boy's throat tightened. He searched his memory for anything, detention slips, late assignments, small infractions, but nothing explained this. The envelope slid across the desk until it rested in front of him. "Open it," Mr. Johnson said softly. Diego's hands trembled as he peeled it open. Inside were several documents. The first was a letter, stamped with an official seal he did not recognize. Words leapt at him. Confidential, restricted, transfer of custody. His pulse quickened. "What is this?" he whispered. Mrs. Turner spoke carefully. "These are records connected to your family. Something has come to light, and it involves you directly." The walls of the office seemed to press in closer. Diego shook his head. "My family? I don't understand." Mr. Johnson's gaze was steady. "That's why we called you here. But before we explain, we need you to answer a few questions." The door clicked shut behind them. The sound echoed like a final lock. Mr. Johnson placed a sheet of paper before Diego. "Do you recognize the symbol?" It was a crest, two intersecting circles, lined with sharp arrows. Diego frowned.
"No."
"I've never seen it." The counselor and principal exchanged a glance. "Diego," Mrs. Turner said gently, "have your parents ever spoken to you about Long Beach before you moved here?" The boy shook his head slowly. "We've always lived here. At least, I thought we had." A silence stretched. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the room. "You may not be who you believe you are," Mr. Johnson said finally. "And others know this already." Diego's stomach dropped. His chest felt hollow. "Others? What do you mean by others?" The principal's eyes narrowed. "That is why you must be careful. Starting today, everything you do will be watched." The boy's voice cracked. "Watched by who?" Before Mr. Johnson could answer, the intercom on his desk buzzed sharply. A secretary's urgent voice rang through. "Sir, There are two men waiting in the reception. They say it concerns Diego Ramirez. The room froze. Diego's heart hammered. Mr. Johnson rose from his chair, his expression set like stone. "Stay here," he ordered. He and Mrs. Turner left the office swiftly, leaving Diego alone with the half-open envelope. The boy could hear muffled voices in the reception area beyond the hallway. Deep, unfamiliar voices. He leaned closer to the envelope, scanning the papers. A photograph slipped free, an image of a younger version of himself, but dressed in clothes he did not remember. Behind him stood two adults, their faces blurred by shadows. The voices grew louder. One of the men spoke firmly. "We have the right to see him. It cannot wait." Diego's blood ran cold.
Who were they?
Why did they want him? Footsteps approached once more. Mrs. Turner re-entered, her face pale. "Diego, we need to leave."
Now.
Mrs. Turner gripped Diego's arm and pulled him through a side door of the office. They hurried down a narrow corridor that smelled of cleaning chemicals and dust. "Keep moving," she urged. "Who are those men?" Diego gasped. "Not here. I'll explain when we're safe." They burst out into the car park behind the school. The late afternoon sun glared off rows of vehicles. Mrs. Turner unlocked her car and pushed Diego inside. As the engine roared to life, Diego glanced back at the school's main entrance. Two men in dark suits were stepping out, their eyes scanning the grounds. One lifted a hand, pointing directly towards them. The car shot forward, tires screeching. "Hold on, Diego," Mrs. Turner said. "This is only the beginning." They drove for nearly 20 minutes, weaving through the busy streets of Long Beach until the school was far behind them. Finally, Mrs. Turner turned into a quiet residential lane, stopping before a modest house with drawn curtains. Inside, the air was cool and faintly scented with coffee. A lamp flickered on, casting shadows across shelves stacked with old files and books. "Sit down," she told him firmly. "There is much you must hear." Diego's nerves burned. "Tell me what's going on. Why me? Why those men?" Mrs. Turner sat across from him, her hands folded. "Diego, your family has been hiding something. And whether you like it or not, you are at the center of it." The boy leaned forward, his pulse racing. "What are you saying?" Her voice lowered to a whisper. "You are connected to a name that others fear. A name tied to an organization that has been silent for years." The shadows in the room seemed to grow darker. Mrs. Turner retrieved a file from a locked drawer and placed it before him. On its cover was the same symbol he had seen earlier, the two circles and sharp arrows. "This," she said, "is the mark of an old network. Your parents were once part of it. They left to protect you, but secrets like this cannot remain buried." Diego's head spun. "My parents?
No.
They're just ordinary people." Mrs. Turner shook her head. "Not entirely. They tried to live as though nothing had happened. But records show your name was placed on a list years ago. And that list is being sought again." Diego whispered. "Why me? What do they want?" Her eyes were grave. "They want control, Diego. And you may be the key." A knock thundered at the door. The knock became pounding, heavy and relentless. Mrs. Turner rose quickly, motioning Diego towards the back of the house.
"Go.
Now." The front door shook under the force of blows. Voices barked commands outside. Diego stumbled through the kitchen and out into the night air of the back garden. The wooden fence loomed ahead. He scrambled over it, landing roughly on the other side. Behind him, the door to the house splintered. He heard shouts, the crash of furniture. Diego ran. The streets of Long Beach blurred as his legs carried him away from the chaos. But the sound of footsteps followed. The city lights flickered as Diego tore through alleyways and side streets. Neon signs glowed above closed shops, and the distant roar of the ocean whispered in the night. He glanced over his shoulder. Two figures were still following, their dark silhouettes closing in. Diego ducked into a narrow passage, his lungs burning. A chain-link fence blocked his way, but desperation gave him strength. He climbed, gripping the cold metal with trembling fingers, pulling himself over just as one of the men lunged beneath him. Landing hard, Diego staggered forward into the open street. Cars honked as he dashed across, narrowly avoiding headlights. His chest heaved with every breath. Somewhere behind, tires screeched. They were not giving up. Diego fled upwards, finding a stairwell that led to the roof of a deserted building. He burst through the metal door and into the cool night air. The view of Long Beach stretched before him, glittering and endless. But the footsteps echoed close behind. The two men emerged onto the rooftop, their eyes locked on him. One spoke, his voice deep and commanding. "Diego, there is no point running. You belong with us. It is in your blood." The boy backed away until his heels met the ledge. The city hummed below, distant and unreachable. His heart thundered against his ribs. The second man stepped forward, holding out a hand. "Come quietly, and no harm will come to you. Resist, and we cannot promise the same." Diego's breath caught. The night wind tugged at his shirt. Shadows closed in on all sides. And then, behind him, another voice rose from the darkness of the rooftop. "Step away from him."
Now.
The two men froze. Diego turned sharply, eyes wide. Someone else had been waiting all along.